Hi, I'm Dr. Larry Malerba, and welcome once again to the All Things Homeopathy Materia Medica series. Today I'll be discussing Antimonium Crudum. Antimony is an element on the periodic table with atomic number 51. Antimony is found in nature as stibnite, which is a gray metallic mineral composed of antimony and sulfur. The chemical formula of antimony trisulfide is Sb2S3. Antimonium is often indicated for irritable kids, but it can also be used for adults too. All right, so let's jump right in.
Okay, so when we look at the overall symptom picture of antimonium, I think it's possible to discern a theme that runs throughout its pathology, and that theme is hardening. The books don't really talk about this theme, but I do believe that it's a good way to summarize the most definitive characteristics of ant crude. Ant crude tends to be hardened, either on the emotional level or the physical level, or both. Ant Crude hardens himself on the psychological level by fending people off, by keeping people away. The two most important defining features of antimonium are an aggravation from or an aversion to being touched, and an aggravation from or an aversion to being looked at. Antimonium children, in particular, are angry, peevish, cross, fretful, and cranky. They can't stand to be looked at and can't stand to be touched. If you try to touch them or look at them, they'll cry, scream, and become even more angry. They do not want consolation. They're averse to company, and they can be suspicious and mistrustful, and may recoil and become more irritable with the slightest bit of attention paid to them. I remember a case from years ago of a kid with warts. I recall trying to get a look at his face. He wore a baseball cap pulled down so that the visor made it hard to see his eyes. As I bent over to take a look under the visor, he angrily turned his head away from me in order to avoid my gaze. His parents made it clear that to look at or to touch him would only aggravate him. After prescribing antimonium crude, I received a phone call weeks later from a pharmacist who wanted to talk to me. He told me that the child's family were regular customers of his and that he'd known the boy for years. He was calling me because he just had to know what I had given him. I asked why he wanted to know. He replied that he had tried on numerous occasions over the years to be friendly with the boy, but that the boy had never given him a chance until recently. The last time he came into the store, he looked directly at the pharmacist, smiled, and to his amazement, said hi to him. Here we see how this boy, who was hard and defensive, had softened so much that his neighborhood pharmacist couldn't help but notice. I spent a half hour on the phone answering the pharmacist's questions that day. He subsequently made an appointment to meet with me so that he could learn more about homeopathy. Soon afterwards, he began stocking homeopathic remedies on the shelves of his pharmacy. Not only that, but at the follow up visit, I found out that the kid's warts had softened and cleared up too. Okay, now, so the picture of this remedy is similar in children and adults in some ways, but quite different in other ways. The literature describes the ant crude adult as being soft, sweet, sentimental, emotional, and sensitive. They're idealistic, excitable, and poetic, sometimes talking in rhymes and verses. They're easily moved by art and beauty, and they are romantic about love. The books talk about how the moonlight accentuates this romantic feeling. They idealize love and long for an ideal romantic partner. But in the event that someone lets them down, they can become disappointed. When their fantasy of an ideal partner eludes them, their idealism can be deflated, and they may begin to isolate themselves. They become sad and weepy, and lovesick with grief. Romanticism and idealism turn to sadness, and they become sulky, not wanting to talk to others. They become fond of solitude and averse to company, rejecting contact with others. Here we see how they start out soft and sensitive and gradually become hardened, not unlike ant crude children. The disappointed antimonium type narrows his circle of contacts in order to isolate himself. He becomes morose and may begin to experience a loathing for life. He feels nostalgic and homesick, longing for the ideal past and pining for his idealized romantic partner. He begins to feel anxious about his future and anxious about his fate. This disappointed love can sometimes cross over into suicidal thinking. He thinks of drowning himself or shooting himself, and his suicidal thoughts make him restless at night. Now, to be clear, this is a description of the ant crude adult according to the homeopathic literature. I've personally gotten only a glimpse of this picture. I've seen a few adults who have responded well to this remedy, and I would certainly describe them as sweet, soft, and sensitive. But I've not seen cases where the mental state has become hardened, as with the antimonium child. In a certain sense, we can say that antimonium crude is like a cross between the angry, irritable touchiness of chamomilla and the sensitive, romantic, lovesick nature of Natrum muriaticum. All right, now, so useful rubrics that reflect some of the core issues and behaviors of antimonium crude include anger from being touched, irritable child cries when touched, morose sulkiness aggravated by touch, aversion to being touched, aversion to being touched in children, anger when looked at, irritable when looked at, cannot bear to be looked at, child cries when looked at, aversion to bathing in children, which, when you think about it, is like a version of being touched, taciturn, indisposed to talk, taciturn children, aversion to company, aversion to company desires solitude, desire for romantic love, sentimental in moonlight, ailments from disappointed love, love sick, loathing of life, suicidal disposition by drowning, suicidal disposition by shooting, and suicidal thoughts drive him out of bed. Okay, now let's talk about the ant crude generals and modalities. Okay, now, so generally speaking, antimonium is warm blooded and aggravated by heat or by becoming overheated. It's especially aggravated by radiant heat, like the kind of heat produced by the sun, or the heat from a stove or a fireplace. This is in keeping with the idea that ant crude is aggravated by touch, because we can think of radiant heat as the type of heat that reaches out and touches. The most important generals, though, are antimonium's eating habits and its food cravings. The ant crude type has a distinct tendency to overeat. He eats beyond his capacity. He loves to eat, and he is gluttonous. He eats so much that he makes himself sick, and his symptoms are aggravated from overeating. And one of the biggest telltale clues that can point to antimonium is a desire for cucumbers. In addition to cucumbers, Aunt Crude also loves sour, acidic things. So the perfect combination of the two are pickles, which of course are fermented, acidic, and or vinegary cucumbers. On more than one occasion, I've had parents tell me that their child's favorite food is a cucumber dipped in some kind of vinegar-based dressing. And although antimonium craves these types of foods, they also have a tendency to aggravate his digestion. Another general is that Ant Crude can be a remedy for changeable symptoms and or alternating states. Ant Crude can fit both changeable moods and changeable physical symptoms. For example, it fits headache alternating with stomach pain and constipation alternating with diarrhea. Some references speak of antimonium's facial appearance as being soft and round, and I have confirmed this on a couple of occasions. One more general is that ant crude is aggravated by suppression. This applies to suppressed skin eruptions, suppressed discharges, and suppressed menses. Additional modalities worth mentioning include the fact that ant crude can be aggravated from bathing. It lists under being aggravated by both warm bathing and cold bathing. And although we speak of ant crude as being sentimental and ecstatic in the moonlight, it can also be aggravated by moonlight. All right, now, so most of antimonium's physical symptomatology tends to center around the digestion and the skin. One way of conceptualizing this is to say that the digestion is soft and the skin is hard. The digestion is weak and easily disturbed, and the skin is tough and hard. In terms of skin conditions, Ant Crude is a remedy for hard, thickened, tough skin. It fits a wide variety of skin growths, including warts, calluses, corns, and lumps. It fits hard, thick, painful calluses on the soles of the feet that may be tender to walk on. The fingernails and toenails, too, can be thick, distorted, yellowed, brittle, cracked, and prone to splitting. Growths can form beneath the nails in the nail beds. Ant crude is a remedy to consider in cases of scleroderma, which is an autoimmune disease that involves excessive production of collagen, which in turn causes thickening and hardening of the skin and other tissues. I was once consulted by a young woman for treatment of her so called plantar warts. She had a soft, round face, and her temperament was pleasant and sweet. When I examined her foot, I was shocked by what I found. The entire sole of the foot was one continuous layer of thick, hard, tough growth. I honestly didn't know what it was. I couldn't tell if it was a giant callus or hundreds of warts. I'd never seen anything like it. She had tried burning it off and freezing it off, all to no avail. To my absolute amazement, it took less than 3 months and a few rounds of antimonium to completely clear the bottom of her foot. Ant crude also fits a lot of skin conditions of the mouth and face. The corners of the eyes, nose, and mouth can be chapped and cracked with yellow or honey-colored crusts. Antimonium is one of the main remedies for impetigo. It also fits thrush with mouth sores or aphtha, along with the keynote symptom of a thick white-coated tongue that looks like a layer of snow or fur. When we see the combination of white-coated tongue along with digestive troubles, we must think of ant crude. Additional ant crude skin conditions include eczema, blisters, pimples, pustules, chickenpox, and measles. And most of these skin eruptions tend to be aggravated by warmth, radiant heat, and bathing. Okay, now, so while the skin is hard and tough, the ant crude digestion is soft and sensitive. The digestion is weak and easily upset. Antimonium's stomach is his weak spot. He often complains of indigestion, especially as a consequence of his poor eating habits. The notorious ant crude tendency to overeat makes him susceptible to developing heartburn and or gastritis. He's prone to belching, bloating, distended abdomen, and flatulence. Psychological shocks can be felt in the stomach too. His emotions are often experienced in that region, and he may feel sick to his stomach as a result. The antimonium type is also prone to obesity. It fits obesity both in children and in older people. Ant crude is also a remedy for diarrhea, and the diarrhea tends to be aggravated by acidic foods, sour foods, and vinegar. Sometimes the diarrhea alternates with constipation. And the ant crude stools tend to be lumpy and are described in literature as being watery with lumps. Now, a few additional ant crude clues and conditions include a cough that is made worse from overheating or worse from entering a warm room. Likewise, hoarseness can be aggravated by becoming too warm. It's also a remedy for whooping cough associated with vomiting, and it fits gout associated with stomach problems and gout that alternates with vomiting. And lastly, just like ant crude has lumpy skin and lumpy stools, it's also generally prone to lumpy discharges, especially lumpy leukorrhea in women. Okay, now it's time to discuss remedy relationships. All right, now, the only two remedies listed in the literature as being complements to antimonium are Squilla maritima and sulfur. Remedies that we want to compare to antimonium include chamomilla, which is a children's remedy, is hot blooded, very irritable, averse to being touched, cannot bear to be looked at, and is prone to digestive problems like colic and diarrhea. Natrum muriaticum is warm blooded, emotionally sensitive and romantic, easily offended, averse to consolation, averse to company, gets cracks on the lips, and likes sour, vinegary foods. Recall that it can sometimes be helpful to think of antimonium as a cross between chamomilla and nat mur. Senna is also a children's remedy, is similarly angry, irritable, averse to being touched, and cannot bear to be looked at. Ipecac is irritable, warm blooded, fits children's coughs aggravated by a warm room, and has symptoms associated with digestive concomitants. Graphites has similar skin problems, including cracks, calluses, skin thickening, and yellow or honey colored discharges, thick, distorted nails, digestive troubles, and obesity. Hepar sulf is highly sensitive, very irritable, can't stand to be touched, desires sour, vinegary, acidic foods, and fits a variety of skin symptoms. And lastly, sulfur is warm blooded, irritable, cranky, tends toward obesity, has indigestion, heartburn, and diarrhea, and fits many skin conditions. Okay, that's Antimonium Crudum in a nutshell. I appreciate your support for this channel, so please don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks for watching the All Things Homeopathy channel, and may the vital force be with you and your loved ones.